We think that creating a one-stop shop for all of your sports shows and movies and where to watch them is part of what's compelling relative to what is out there, and part of the underlying problem and promise, we're trying to make to our customer that we're solving, and that these aren't disparate, issues, right? What you're going to watch is more compelling than where you're going to watch it, but you need to know where you're going to watch what you're going to watch. And so it's like these problems kind of have to be solved together to be impactful, right?
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Ryan Schreiber. Ryan is a longtime Clevelander and major supporter and lover of the city, as well as the founder and CEO of Streamline, an innovative mobile platform that's tackling one of the streaming industry's most pressing challenges, helping users navigate the increasingly fragmented world of content and entertainment, from sports, shows, and movies across what now amounts to over 200 streaming platforms. With over $1.6 million in funding raised since founding the company earlier in 2024, Ryan is on a mission to transform how we discover and share content. Before launching Streamline, Ryan played a pivotal role in building Vertical Knowledge, another Cleveland-based company which recently was acquired by Babel Street, a leading identity intelligence and risk operations organization. Beyond entrepreneurship, Ryan was an investment banker with KeyBanc Capital Markets here in Cleveland. After graduating with honors from Middlebury College in 2013, he is a board trustee at University School and captain of Spin for Stew, a cycling initiative that's raised nearly $1 million for cancer research. In our conversation today, we will explore Ryan's journey from finance to tech entrepreneurship, overcoming the fear of failure, exploring the problems Streamline is solving in the streaming landscape, and unpack how the proverbial Cleveland chip on Ryan's shoulder has shaped his approach to building a consumer technology company. So with that, please enjoy this awesome conversation with Ryan after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by John Carroll University's Boler College of Business, widely recognized as one of the top business schools in the region. As we've heard time and time again from entrepreneurs here on Lay of the Land, many of whom are proud alumni of John Carroll University, success in this ever-changing world of business requires a dynamic and innovative mindset, deep understanding of emerging technologies and systems, strong ethics, leadership prowess, acute business acumen, all qualities nurtured through the Boler College of Business. With 4 different MBA programs of study spanning professional, online, hybrid, and 1-year flexible, the Boler College of Business provides flexible timelines and various class structures for each MBA track, including online, in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous, all to offer the most effective options for you, including the ability to participate in an elective international study tour, providing unparalleled opportunities to expand your global business knowledge by networking with local companies overseas and experiencing a new culture. The career impact of a Boler MBA is formative and will help prepare you for this future of business and get more out of your career. To learn more about John Carroll University's Boler MBA programs, please go to business.jcu.edu. The Boler College of Business is fully accredited by AACSB International, the highest accreditation a college of business can have. So it was about a year ago, I think, when we first connected. And as we were, mentioning before we turned on the mic here, originally through the podcast itself almost, and Caleb Dumont, who I believe shared his story on episode 151. And around then, you had made concrete something that I was genuinely hoping would be a long-term, consequence of this podcast and the community building work that I feel genuinely passionate about. And it's really around the importance and the impact of having a more connected community in Cleveland. And so I wanted to start by thanking you for making it, clear how this kind of work can begin to take root, begin to take a life of its own, and create, all these real positive developments that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
That would be as good of a place to start as any.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Jeff. Well, first of all, on my end, I just want to thank you, obviously, for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. As you know, I'm a big fan of yours and the podcast, but it's also like to me been one of my real highlights of the past year in navigating kind of the Cleveland startup community. I think, what you've built is resourceful and useful in and of itself, but the events and the community component are what makes it really special. So I'm grateful to be a part of that community.
Awesome. So with that, again, a bunch of different places we could start the exploration of your story and journey, but like the podcast, thought Cleveland would be as good of a place as any to do that, knowing it's a factor with huge influence in the work you're doing, have done now with Streamline, prior in your professional career, really at the heart of how we got connected in the first place. But, tell us about your Cleveland journey.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I'm a lifelong Clevelander outside of my 4 years away from here for college. I've lived here my whole life. My family goes way back here. I'm lucky to have kind of great roots and friends here. And kind of the past 9 years, my job took me elsewhere, more often than I'd like. And this job is already taking me elsewhere, and I know will continue to do so. But in kind of making the pivot to start, Streamline, I really wanted to lean into the Cleveland startup community and build new connections here, really build an investor group here, a team here, a culture here, and really just delve into everything Cleveland has to offer. And I think that's been, even though we haven't really proven anything as a business yet, it's been rewarding from the start to kind of take that approach.
Hmm. And where do you find your entrepreneurial inclination comes from?
Yeah, so it definitely was there kind of day one. My dad was an entrepreneur, so it was that seed was definitely planted. I worked at a really big company, KeyBanc, right out of school, and then I quickly kind of realized that I wanted to be in an entrepreneurial environment, and had the opportunity to go work at Vertical Knowledge and with Matt Carpenter, who I really view as like my kind of entrepreneurial, mentor, the person I've worked for the last 9 years that's been very supportive of this new journey for me. And so I've been lucky that I was just surrounded by great entrepreneurs and kind of found myself with a problem that I found compelling enough now to go solve, that I wanted to make that jump.
And we'll certainly unpack what that problem is. But I'd love to, if you'll indulge me on a brief detour.
Sure.
Just for those who don't know, the Vertical Knowledge story a bit. It's been, one of these under the radar, but, I think real Cleveland successes in the startup world. And so, just 9 years is a long time. Share a bit about that journey and how it set the stage for, you ultimately to embark on your own entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So like I said, I was lucky enough, to go work for Matt Carpenter and Vertical Knowledge and be part of really a great company and an incredible culture, and work with people that wanted to solve our clients' problems and really lived and breathed that. VK was really on the tip of the spear from kind of the big data in the big data revolution, collecting public data at scale and serving public sector customers. And then I ended up working closely with our financial services customers as we grew that business, with a great team. And so VK was a very entrepreneurial environment. We were really, like I said, focused on solving our customers' problems versus, going and building things we wanted to build, which I think was kind of core to who we were, built great relationships with those customers. And it was a great outcome too, right? The business, raised money multiple times from institutional investors, was able to exit at a decent number, and people were able to do well. So it was a really great journey, great people more than anything. Community, was definitely core there, and really just learned so much from Matt Carpenter and the team there. So I was fortunate to spend almost the last decade of my life there. And was also able to become a person, become an adult there. I went there when I was 24 and, was still live downtown. And in the time I worked there, I met my wife, and, had kids and bought a house and all that good stuff. So it was a place that kind of gave me the space to grow as a person too, which I think is sometimes hard. So it's a really special place.
So coming out of it, I imagine, you have your greenfield, set of diverse options. Why opt to go back and start a company?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I mean, the problem was compelling, but it was about a year ago. I was traveling still at VK with my boss, and we were at dinner and kind of talking about life and career. It's a pretty deep conversation. But I kind of, made the comment at that dinner, like, yeah, I don't really want to go get another job, if I'm going to ever make a change. And I think that my decision to go to VK in the first place was really tied to that, leaving like a investment banking job to go work in an entrepreneurial tech company. I think with kind of my roots, whether it was fully conscious or a little bit subconscious at the time, that decision kind of laid the groundwork, and I was able to kind of touch all parts of that business over the years. And then, I think once the problem that I discovered became compelling enough and it became in the business model became compelling enough to me is where I really was like, okay, let's start to figure out how we get this built and start to validate this a little further, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, sometimes the path to entrepreneurship is one of not wanting to find a job. So
yeah, there's no doubt about that.
So tell us about the idea. What was this problem that was eating at you that inspired, going out and starting a whole company to solve it?
Yeah, so it's actually more like 2 years ago that I was sitting on my couch one night trying to figure out what to watch. And I was just like, this has become so frustrating that I'll spend 20 minutes scrolling on Netflix, don't even end up always finding something to watch. And it's one of 6 apps that I pay for. So I'm like, okay, this is annoying. Are there solutions out there that solve this problem? Is there like an app that the way the idea really first hit me was like, I wish all of the shows I love and sports teams that I follow were all just on my calendar when there's new shows out and when there's, game on with a link to where to watch. That was kind of like the idea that I was just like, oh, that'd be really nice. Wasn't even thinking of it as a business, start to look for apps and like there's some content discovery apps and stuff that gives you, notification on when your shows are back. But what I found was what was out there really had missed servicing the sports fan and hadn't really built, a social environment the way like Goodreads has for books or in many ways Spotify is doing for music. So I'm like, ultimately people just want to know what their friends are watching. And that's what I kept hearing from people as I talk to people is like, think about you're at dinner and the conversation is, what are you guys watching right now? And maybe you make a note in your phone and then you have to Google where to watch it. But it's kind of this frustrating thing. Sometimes you don't even remember what people told you, and you certainly don't remember where to watch it, right? So Jeff, do you have that experience as a consumer?
It is a lot to keep track of. That is for sure.
Right. So it's this kind of frustrating discovery problem, management problem, social problem. And so I'm kind of looking at what's out there. I'm like, there's nothing really there. I actually watched this documentary about the founding of Spotify called The Playlist that's on Netflix. You can find that in Streamline, our app. But and that kind of was like, oh, there were so many more barriers in that industry to try and aggregate music versus streaming content, right? Versus streaming video content, like I kind of had in mind. And so kind of from there, from talking to people, looking at what was out there, I was like, all right, there's something really here. Now that wasn't quite where I was like, okay, there's a business model and I'm going to start spending money to get it developed. So there were definitely some additional time and layers before we got there.
But people, it is a problem that was not unique to yourself.
No, right. It's a pretty wide addressable market problem that we're trying to solve.
Right. So how did you go about, trying to understand and validate, knowing that it's a problem, it's something that people experience? I can personally attest, I've experienced that problem. But what's kind of the aha moment that led you to believe that there is an opportunity to try and solve it from a business standpoint?
Yeah, I don't think it was one thing from a business standpoint. I think it was more like a series of things and conversations. And I'd say that some of those things, some of those, things I quickly started to come up with from a business model perspective or talk to people about, it was kind of like, okay, maybe something's there. And then I just kind of found that I was getting deeper and the conversations with more strategic industry focused people were getting longer. Right. And so I was like, okay, maybe we are onto something. And as people kind of in the space started to validate the idea to some extent, there were so many articles in the Wall Street Journal written during this time. I think that became part of it. And then there was a series of kind of like data information I discovered about sports kind of coming to the head of this problem, which was more like a year ago, right? If you remember, like there was that Dolphins-Chiefs Peacock playoff game that was the first NFL game outside of the standing Thursday night games, like first playoff game to go streaming exclusive. And like that point of frustration for the consumer combined with kind of having the aha of, oh, the sports fan is the biggest consumer of streaming by time spent and, does it live in a more monetizable way and kind of like, is it the center of this problem is probably where I was like, okay, there's got to be a business around this too. And that's who we should focus on solving, this problem for first.
It's funny. There's one of these like old business aphorisms from, I believe it's Barksdale, but he talks about, there's basically two businesses. There's bundling and unbundling. And, the pendulum just kind of swings back and forth. But, when, as you described the original problem, it's like, well, didn't we used to have scheduled content and,
Yo, totally. Yeah, and I actually still get cable. I'm probably the youngest person that still gets it because I live in market with my team. So it's still the easiest solution for me to watch all my teams in one place. Like I end up on the phone with Spectrum every 2 months to get my bill back down because it goes up like, how quickly they raise that. But, it is so funny how it's like this solution existed. But what you kind of see now with the sports rights being bid out for the next 10 years and the size of these companies, right? That I think early on when the streaming thing happened, it was like, okay, there'll be consolidation, right? There'll M&A or joint ventures, right? Even the way Hulu started. And these are too big of companies to acquire each other, right? And that ESPN Fox joint venture for a college football app got struck down. And so there is this kind of disparate environment is what we're stuck in for the next decade. So we got to find a way to navigate it.
Yeah. So with that context, and the framing of the fragmented streaming market, help set the stage for Streamline and, what this market looks like, how has it evolved over time, and really what is the problem now that you're setting out to solve?
Yeah, so Streamline is the only app you need to find the sports, shows, and movies that you and your friends love to watch, right? It allows you to navigate discovery across platforms, allows you to see what your friends are watching and curate lists, puts it all on your calendar, like my initial little funky idea.
Yep.
But, really, I view this and the team today views this as a problem set that I just described. And I think what we've seen is that there's been really solid fragmented solutions for shows, or even like ESPN launched their kind of where to watch platform within the website now. So they've acknowledged this is a problem. I think the challenge is that a lot of the early apps to solve this around shows or movies were built more for film fans pre the problem of today. So in looking at this as a problem set, we think that creating a one-stop shop for all of your sports shows and movies and where to watch them is part of what's compelling relative to what is out there and part of the underlying problem and promise, we're trying to make to our customer that we're solving, and that these aren't disparate, issues, right? What you're going to watch is more compelling than where you're going to watch it. But you need to know where you're going to watch what you're going to watch, right? And so it's like these problems kind of have to be solved together to be impactful, right? And I think we've seen that, adding the social layer to that is where it becomes, I think, exponentially more valuable, right? People see ratings, platforms or algorithms recommend things. but they're disparate. And so consolidating that and adding the layer of what your friends actually like and being able to look at shared preferences of groups of people and couples and families, we think will be a great way to kind of bring people together and create community and social discourse around content versus, the more toxic, conversations on other social platforms.
So when you and I had first met and you were, telling me about this journey you were about to embark on, more formally at the time, prior to the north of, $1.5 million in funding that you've since raised and secured for the business, I'm curious what the most salient learnings over the last, year or so have been since when you really set out to address this problem and where you've kind of arrived at as the right strategic approach to go about solving it.
There's probably hundreds of things, Jeff, that I could go to. I mean, look, this is a very different business than I've been in before. So, I haven't been in a B2C business before. So there's all sorts of consumer distribution, marketing things that I've learned. I'm by no means the expert. I'm working with people a lot smarter than me on those fronts. But, I think I've learned a lot in terms of product development, iterating, how you synthesize user feedback. But there isn't necessarily one thing because it's all just so incremental. And when you're stuck in it day to day, it's like, it doesn't feel like there's been any it just feels like we're just kind of running through one wall and into the next wall and trying to make sure we look around to do that somewhat strategically, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So maybe just take us through then what, the Streamline experience looks like. And, I believe there's probably north of 200 streaming applications today. And so when we talk about, the fragmentation and kind of being over inundated with where to go find these shows, what the shows even are.
Yeah.
Just what is the experience?
Yeah, I think the current experience, right? Like there's multiple layers to it, right? Because there's multiple kind of problems we're trying to solve. But like so much of it starts just like the what should I watch right now and people going and scrolling around and whether it's on Netflix, whether they go to other apps, whether they still get cable and flip around. And we really want to solve for that by being, you look at your calendar first. If you don't have something on tonight you want to watch, that you can then take it to this discovery, right? But there's this kind of discovery experience that is with your remote on, apps that aren't where you find any other information in the world, right? Like all other information in the world today, if you need to quickly find out, you go to your phone and your handheld. Where with this medium, we use a remote we use for nothing else and a variety of different apps that don't consolidate this, right? So it's kind of this funky experience relative to the world we live in. There is absolutely word of mouth and other social conversation around this. But like I've kind of said, it's not systematized, right? There's no systematic way to kind of see the source of truth on what your friends are watching and get those recommendations. So you're kind of in a box doing this, right? The streaming platforms to promote and distribute their content send emails now, right? I don't know if you get those from your streaming, from the platforms you subscribe to. Do you get those, Jeff?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, they are struggling with distributing and letting you know when your favorite show is back and how to do that, right? Because you don't really go there first. Outside, people go to Netflix first, but if like you're Hulu or Prime or Apple TV Plus or Peacock or Paramount, right? Like you're not the place people are necessarily going to look night to night. So kind of connecting with the consumer on when they're in that moment is really hard. And when you look at it, the streaming industry is really struggling, the media industry, to turn these into profitable platforms, right? They're struggling with churn. They have high single-digit monthly churn. Netflix is the exception. Prime's also an exception because of the other service you get from it. And so they've kind of, what the streaming platforms have said is, we know our experience isn't sticky, and we're looking at sports, as the way to stop churn, because you can binge through a season of a show. You cannot binge through the NFL season, right? Like Peacock has spread these streaming exclusive games out. It's what the NBA is going to do next year, with Prime and Peacock exclusive games too, as their rights shift. So this experience is only becoming kind of more fragmented and disparate as I'm kind of describing. And then there's the like, just where is something to watch? People Google for that, right? And it kind of gives you an unclear answer, right? It's not, for lack of a better word, streamlined. And so, the notes to Google thing we think is like a weird layer to this thing you're kind of doing on your TV. You kind of try and find a way to track it on your phone. We've found there's very little brand awareness and usage of the competitive platforms. While they have some, audiences, it's more outside of the US, and it's really in a nichier film loving market than kind of your mass consumer, your sports fan who loves reality TV and is an avid social media user, who's kind of our, target persona here out of the gate.
To me, it feels like out of the gate, the partnership strategy is very kind of integral to the overall business, and that the MVP for, Streamline's vision is actually, quite a robust offering just to get started. How have you thought about partnerships, navigating the whole, licensing and IP side of this space?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So I guess to start with the data and the licensing, I mean, the first underlying point here is, unlike the music industry with Spotify, we are trying to promote other people's products and drive signups and usage to the streaming platform. So we are trying to help them. We think we can monetize helping them per the problem they have. So there's affiliate marketing deals we're implementing to drive signups to the streaming platform, so that when you find something on our app and go and sign up for that platform, we get a kickback. We'll do native ads promoting content in our discovery feed. We'll promote adjacent products with advertising, do partnerships around events moving, to streaming platforms and new places to help the consumer navigate that industry distribution problem. How we've properly licensed that data has been actually kind of where my VK experience is helpful a little bit, in that I had to license 4 different data sets. And so we worked with Grace Note Nielsen, obviously, the Nielsen name, and then a couple other European providers and one other US provider to kind of build our own database of content, right? To make sure we have the broadest coverage. So even if you're only a sports fan or reality TV fan, you can find all of your shows, movies, and sports in this one place. And so we've licensed that through those providers, stitched it together, built our own database that we're going to build some really cool tools on top of to make it even more dynamic and searchable. Right now, when you search on a streaming platform, you're pretty limited to search by title. We're going to do some really cool things in terms of making it so you can search by actor and genre and era, and are finishing kind of aggregating that data to make it all the more dynamic. So we feel really good about how we've gone about approaching the licensing. We think that as we build a user base, we're going to be a really valuable partner to the streaming platforms longer terms, but on the way up, kind of smaller streaming platforms and more, local type of efforts like sports teams, right? If we can drive viewership, on the fringes, right, then, that can be kind of our proof point to go do it at scale.
Lay of the Land is brought to you by Impact Architects and by 90. As we share the stories of entrepreneurs building incredible organizations in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio, Impact Architects has helped hundreds of those leaders, many of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their own visions and build these great organizations. I believe in Impact Architects and the people behind it so much that I have actually joined them personally in their mission to help leaders gain focus, align together, and thrive by doing what they love. If you too are trying to build great, Impact Architects is offering to sit down with you for a free consultation or provide a free trial through 90, the software platform that helps teams build great companies. If you are interested in learning more about partnering with Impact Architects or by leveraging 90 to power your own business, please go to ia.layoftheland.fm. The link will also be in our show notes. You had mentioned that Streamline incorporates social features, the kind of shared friend, the social part that maybe has been absent from streaming that is present in all these other, very online markets at the moment. What does the community building strategy look like? How have you thought about that? And to drive engagement, retention, and really just in the aftermath of actual launch of Streamline, how have you thought about the social component of it?
Yeah, so we actually released an update to the App Store today, still in our kind of beta phase. But the big change is that we added like a fifth landing page in an item in our tray at the bottom that is friends. And so now, you have a place of discovery to find your friends that are already on the app. We've integrated a cool algorithm that is pretty accurate in understanding network, connections. And then that feature also layers in all the activity and posts and usage of your friends so that you can comment and like and see it. And then it enables you to go share the app with your friends very quickly as well, right? And that's also in our sign up flow now. So we've just, we've tried to integrate into the product, right? Those abilities to get people on the flywheel quickly. We're also launching all of our social media accounts, right? Which will be really easy ways for people to kind of hear our voice, see what we're saying, but also share it with friends. So we're just trying to give people all the mechanisms to kind of hop on the wheel and share it with their communities, because we really think that for this to be what we want it to be, it has to be a place of community. It has to be where you can tell your mom what you're watching, or you and your buddies have a group playlist or a group chat about what to watch next, and that our homepage and newsfeed is that source. And so, there's all those kind of little elements that have become a point of focus in our UX design to try and make sure we're making it as easy as possible to share it and find your friends and see what they're watching and what they want to watch. And so that's even something we've added to people's profiles, right? That enables you to see all that information, which is, we think can be really exciting for users of Streamline.
So I would imagine one of the elephants in the room, maybe there's a few, but would be that, when you think about, Netflix or HBO, I mean, they are organizations capable of, spending billions of dollars investing in that recommendation algorithm, that they've really fine-tuned and put the smartest, brightest, most passionate people about making that algorithm as effective as it can be. How do you begin to think about, how to differentiate in this content discovery lens when you have those kinds of organizations with the resources they have, investing orders of magnitude more than you'll be able to in the near future on that kind of stuff?
No, it's a great question, Jeff. And there's so many questions around how to interact with and how to navigate big tech here. But I think the fundamental piece of it is so many of those folks are players in the streaming wars. And so they're not necessarily trying to position themselves to promote content of their competitors. That's not universally true, right? Like, we've seen Amazon's willing to kind of play the aggregator role more than the others, and some of the hardware providers like the Apple TVs and Samsung TVs and Roku's, attempt to do that. I think what fundamentally we can do different is be, in your handheld, like I talked about, right, where you find information. We're leaning into that this is a mobile app, and that's what the consumer wants. And the social piece, right? Like, Netflix isn't going to become a social media company overnight. They have, while there's lists and playlists, you don't follow your friends on there. It's not a point of social interaction, and your TV remote and your TV are not going to entice you to do that, we don't think. But we also think that big companies by nature aren't always the most, innovative, right? We were at a Cleveland event recently together, right, at Nottingham Spur, which is a testament to the fact that big companies by nature aren't always innovative, right? Like, EY brings all these big companies into Cleveland to an innovation center. Big companies end up acquiring for innovation, right? Which, God willing, things go well, right? It could be part of what happens here. But, I think that there's a lot of reasons this hasn't been solved. And some of it is the competitive positioning and the inability to kind of tap into the social element.
Tell us a bit more about the company, itself. Again, when you and I first, chatted about it, since then, you've really rounded out the founding team. Obviously, you've embarked on this fundraising journey. How has that gone? Tell us about what that looks like.
Yeah. So what I'd say is those were like the those are kind of the two kind of pillar questions out of the gate when you're going to start your own company and you kind of have your fear of failure, which I can assure you is very much, still there right here. We have not gotten this thing off the ground, but I kind of have these two questions. Am I going to be able to raise the money, and am I going to get people to work on this? And frankly, given kind of my sales background, being in a company that raised a lot of institutional money, being around other founders and being kind of a part of other fundraising efforts, I was, fairly confident there that my skill set and my network would allow me to do that. It was much, much harder than I thought it would be, though. So I probably thought that would be a little easier than it is. And maybe that's been a little humbling. But, on the other side of things, I've been floored by how quickly really, really talented people, got excited about Streamline and wanted to dive in and work on it. And, our friend that introduced us to each other, Caleb Dumont has been integral there. He's a very well-known tech VC recruiter and has introduced me to some incredible people, including now my co-founder and CTO, Don Pawlowski, who you know as well, Jeff, who's full-time with us here now, is incredible talent and really, well-known person in the Cleveland tech community. Brandon Wetzel, who's our full-time senior engineer, he's incredible, man. Like, this guy's ability to deliver quickly is why we've been able to move at the pace we have with the cost structure we have. And so those guys, along with me, are the full-time team right now. And we've got a lot of incredibly supportive folks, on the marketing side, on the UX side, and then at kind of a board advisor level that have jumped in as well. Some really accomplished people in the streaming industry and the tech world, with Cleveland connections, kind of, which is the funny thing. Like, that's kind of been some of the glue here, both on the investor side and on the team side. That's really what I've leaned into and kind of think we will continue to do that, right? Even it's become a more central part to our go-to-market efforts, right? We're really going to lean into trying to build density in this market. So there's been a lot of learning in the journey of raising money and putting a team together, but both have been rewarding. Both have not been easy, and both will continue to not be easy, right? Like, I'm not really done raising money. I'm already kind of working on the next round, networking with VCs a little bit. And, and on the team front, right? Like, it's going to be a constant evolution of kind of what we're going to need. And hopefully we're on a path where it makes sense to continue to grow that team. But those are both things that I've enjoyed doing. And I'm really excited about where we are on both fronts.
Yeah. One of the funny and often repeated bits from the startup community is that, if you knew how hard it was going to be at the beginning, you may not have done it. So I'm glad you have since learned how difficult it is and that you're doing it anyway.
Yeah. And the other thing I can't say enough is my wife, on those hardest days, has been so central to this. I couldn't have quit my very good job to come do this if she wasn't all in on it. I mean, for a while, I was saying she's the closest thing I have to a co-founder. She came up with the name. She came up with kind of the homepage news feed feature. She is so all in on this. In the meantime, while we're having young kids, right? So she's just been so critical to me being able to do it, because I could not do it without her being all in.
How has fundraising been?
In many ways, it's been great because it's forced, while I have raised from a lot of people I already knew, I have met so many great people, especially here, also elsewhere in the process. So I think it was part of forcing me to network. And, in any conversation now, my perspective is, you never know if someone's going to be an investor, advisor, someone that can contribute to the team. And then, as I've heard it said on your podcast, different ways, I always want to make sure it's a two-way conversation too, right? What do I have to offer that person as well? I feel like I've been so fortunate to have so many people lend a helping hand to me trying to get this started and funded, and, which is amazing to see. So I think that's an important thing in those conversations is to make sure they're two ways, and that makes it all the more rewarding. So I've made so many new friends this year and met people on all sides of town here in terms of leading into that. I was talking to people about how I wanted my office to be closer to the highway here because I feel like I'm on the west side a couple times a week. And like, I grew up on the east side. I live on the east side. My network's more on the east side, but I've got like a lot of good friends on that side of town. Even yesterday, I was with someone that you had lunch with earlier this week, and it's just amazing how people in this town want to help others succeed, how they have a team and community mentality. And so I think that's what's been most rewarding. But yeah, I mean, fundraising in itself is not easy, right? Like, you don't always know until you know. And I probably out of the gate made some assumptions, right? And you think, oh, you got to make sure, check all boxes, continue the conversation, paperwork's got to be signed, the money's got to come in. Like, there are those elements to it. And I think having worked in sales kind of for a good chunk of my VK time was good training for that, frankly.
Yeah, I love to hear all that. Knowing it's a bit imaginary and, to project out how you envision the progress of the company evolving and ultimately the way it all transpires. But, as you made your way through fundraising, I imagine that's a lot of what, you're doing is painting a picture for what the future looks like. And I think it would just be really interesting to hear how you have thought about, what the chapters of Streamline might be as you go to market and, from a place of retrospect, does success actually look like for this company, for the business overall? And, we can talk separately about what it means for you personally and what's motivating you, but just a bit of a forward-looking perspective.
Yeah, totally. And it's really funny, Jeff. I've had this conversation a couple times recently, and I remember like advice I got that's probably like a year old was like how you constantly have to be evolving. And for something like this to work, there always has to be the next feature that has to be sticky, partially because of the potential for competitors and big competitors like we were just talking about. And I really, like a year ago, thought of this as kind of like this end state product that I wanted to go build, right? And this solution, this finite solution. And it's so funny now that we're actually in it and have our beta out and we have a list of 500 other things we want to build. It's like, this could go a lot of different directions. And that's what's exciting about it. And what's been so great about our beta. I mean, we've gotten some great new ideas from users, but it's been so useful in terms of force ranking and prioritizing. What do people need to be able to use this and rely on it, right? And so now looking at it, there are like endless kind of feature and upgrades that I can see over a period of years, making this product more compelling and more tied into your, hardware, or how you create, your bundles potentially, or a marketplace for the streaming industry, right? Those things are dependent on our user acquisition and building some scale, but there's some fun ways to navigate that industry that I see. I also think that like, while we're solving this streaming consumer and industry problem first, there's no reason that Streamline couldn't become the way that, my friends learn that my favorite podcast is Lay of the Land, right? That it becomes, the way you see who's going to the Cavs-Lakers game tonight at Rocket Mortgage Arena, right? Like this kind of social navigation of entertainment and consumption, I think is where this could go. We're even talking now with some strategic folks in the team of just like, how do we orient the product to make sure it scales around those use cases? To your question on what is success here, I mean, success to me is building a community, right? It's solving a problem. It's doing it with simplicity. Those are our core values. And so that is what's fundamentally important. To do that, we need to go acquire some users at scale. To do good, we need to do well, right? Like I want Streamline to be a great source for the community. And I think we can build a business model behind it to make it a super profitable business and, not focus too much on the outcome, focus on solving the problems, focus on our user product-led growth, and see where that goes. Investors obviously want to know where it goes and what that means from a return perspective. So, there is potential for acquisition, but like I've kind of described, I think there is some standalone scale potential to this business. So these are conversations we kind of need to continue to have as a team with the board that's coming together and allow ourselves to kind of read the data and allow the user to tell us what they want. I don't want to over project a vision of 2 years out when, we got an election next week that we have no clue where the world's going a week from now. So we gotta kind of tackle one thing at a time.
There is a lot of uncertainty out there.
Sure.
Well, I guess I'll frame the question in a different way because
hit me again.
In the scenario where Streamline is successful, what changes about the streaming industry writ large and the dynamics of the business?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, right? So for the user, right, we quickly can impact their experience, but we can help the industry with distribution, right? And, making sure the eyes they want to get their product in front of, see their product and are able to navigate up to other content, right? And so I think there is an opportunity to help the industry stabilize, right? And instead of it being kind of this binge through one thing, go here, help with distribution, how that comes together, whether it's through new, packaging and bundling, whether it's through creating a marketplace in our app for them to publish their content, I don't know. We have to kind of allow that to play out a bit. But I think there is, a real opportunity for this to be the way that we kind of rebundle. And, what that means for rights and other things, I think is a long time out. But, I really am excited to kind of continue to navigate the space as it evolves and do it in a way that benefits our user first and foremost, right? Like, while we want to solve the industry problem and we think that's how we'll build a business model, like we want to solve the consumer and user problem first and then kind of go from there, if that's fair.
That's fair enough. What do you find is motivating you? And what does success look like from that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's loaded. Yeah, so I think probably one of the things that held me up out of the gate was probably my fear of failure, right? Like I felt like I really established myself in a job and in an industry and loved the people I worked with, both internally and externally, loved the conferences I went to and had a great lifestyle with that. And so, the fear of losing that and of just failure and shame and embarrassment for trying something definitely was something that like weighed on me. It still does. Like I can feel it when I talk about it. Okay. But it got to a point, and I would say this, it got to a point for my wife and me, not just me, where the fear of seeing this problem solved exceeded that fear of embarrassment and failure. And so I guess to me, it kind of came from that like I definitely had this deep desire inside of me to start a business. I never would have done it or put a significant amount of my own money or asked other people for money if I didn't fundamentally believe it was solving a problem. There's a real business model behind it. And so, I think the motivator there is that I really did want to do something like this. I needed to check a lot of boxes to kind of let myself do it, if that makes sense. But I think it's just one of those challenges and one of those things that, selfishly, like I want to prove to people also that you can do it from Cleveland and build a high profile, successful B2C tech company from here. Like that's one of the kind of chips on my shoulder that, as I heard on a Jeff Stern podcast, to keep the chip in your pocket. But, that is something that motivates me is building something great for here and creating an opportunity for other, outcomes here. And I was afforded that and want to kind of pass that along and engage with the community to enable that. So there's a lot more there that we can unpack.
I can imagine. I don't know. That's one of my favorite motivations in people is because to the degree that the fear of failure prevents you from pursuing the thing that, might cause the regret later in life for not having tried.
Yeah.
I love when people figure out how to try.
When in doubt, on the days where I'm really like, what am I doing? I'll listen to that. To the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement, right? Where he's like, you are already naked,
Yeah.
You got to go live life today because tomorrow is not guaranteed. So that definitely resonates.
And of course, I love the, prove that you can do it in Cleveland, chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, that was already there. That's not even a new thing. That was like I went to school on the East Coast. A lot of people I grew up with here, didn't come back, at least immediately, more coming back now that, see what can be done here. But like, there's this fundamental culture of entrepreneurialism here, right? Like Rockefeller started here, and like, there are so many, and frankly, when you look at like some of our investors and like the incredible, and everyone that's been on your podcast, tech and otherwise, like there is an incredible culture of entrepreneurialism. I think I said this to you, but one of my best friends who lives in New York, works in finance, is like everyone I grew up with, their parents, when you hear about successful people, it's in finance world. Everyone that like you tell me about a successful story in Cleveland, it's like a story about them being an entrepreneur. And so like that is deeply ingrained in the culture here. I think it like hasn't shown its head as much in tech as like other places. Not to say it hasn't, right? There's some great tech stories here, and there's more and more coming. But I think like the perception from the outside is it hasn't. So it's definitely like one of my fundamental like things that gets me up in the morning. I'm wearing my Cleveland vest here, as you can see.
Represent.
Yeah.
Well, as we work to bookend the conversation here, I always like to leave a little space for the thing unsaid, that over the course of our conversation, maybe you wished I had asked you about, or just feels topical and top of mind at the moment.
That's a great question, Jeff. Yeah, what shows are coming back soon, right? I think that's a good topical thing, right? That's the thing that, we think people will be really excited about when they get into our app, that they're like, oh, this person follow that. And then they see on their newsfeed and on their calendar, it's coming back. We've already seen that during our beta with Shrinking, which just came back. Yellowstone's coming back soon. So, Outer Banks just came back. So some good shows. And obviously, you got the World Series right now to watch, and NBA season and NHL getting going, and football heating up. So I guess those are, that's kind of the cue to go download Streamline, in the Apple App Store now. Will be in Google Play soon too, because, you can go figure out what you're going to watch next. Streamline is the only app you need to find the sports shows and movies that you and your friends love to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it really resonates just almost like ideologically at this point, because we're just curation in the world of just exponentially more content is super important. It is overwhelming. And directionally, it just feels like the right undertaking at the moment.
Well, and I think to your point too about big tech, right? Solving it, being able to solve things in a more sophisticated way, right? Like there's the question of what is a big enough problem, or what they're going to spend their time on solving. But I think there's also like this fundamental consumer trust issue, right? That like you would rather get a recommendation from your friend than an algorithm, right? And so I think that's part of where we want to sit here, is that like that basic community and trust is worth more than every, ounce of AI that the world has to offer.
Well said. Let's wrap it with Cleveland. I think our traditional closing question here.
Oh, I love it.
But tell us about a hidden gem, something that other folks may not know about, but perhaps they should.
Yeah, I could give you a list of 1,000, but probably my number one go-to, and this is a place I've been going with my family my whole life, but it's Jack's Deli, which is just like your classic Jewish deli in Cleveland. Best place to get, lox and good deli meat. And it's just a kind of institution and good people running it that have, run it for a long time, and go back to my family and stuff. So great place. If you haven't been, I would highly recommend it. It's on DoorDash too, if you don't feel like going and checking it out. So it's definitely a winner of a spot.
Amazing. Well, Ryan, I just want to thank you for coming on, for sharing your story. I knew at one point you would make your way on the show here, and I'm excited that time has come.
No, Jeff, I'm so grateful to be here with you. I'm such a fan of yours and what you're doing, and just continue doing it, because you're doing great things here and elsewhere, and you're just an incredible leader and resource for the community. So very, very grateful that you've made Cleveland your home.
Well, thank you. That does mean a lot. Well, if people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, if they wanted to experience Streamline for themselves, where would you point them?
Yeah, so you search it in the Apple App Store, like I mentioned. You can search Streamline, and as of today, it's the first thing that comes up after an ad. You can go to streamline.watch, which is our website. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. My email is rschreiber@streamline.watch. Love to connect with new people, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Ryan.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.